Morning Year 10, Mrs Slaney here. I'm just going to go through the answers. For this week's task with you. So I'll run through first the literacy task, how to apply the skills, and then we'll go through and check your answers. So, how to punctuate speech. This is one of the more difficult skills, and as an examiner I've seen this come up previously across the last few years, that students quite like to put dialogue in the narratives. However, there is a caveat that I would add with using dialogue. I would say if you're going to use dialogue in your narratives, just use a small, impactful amount, because it can detract from the actual narrative and the plot, and also you can get taken off on a bit of a tangent with it. So that's just something to be wary of. However, I will go through how to punctuate it properly, so if you do want to use it, then you can do that accurately. So the rules for writing dialogue, as you can see. So all dialogue begins with an opening speech mark and a capital letter. So here's an example for you. I'll be there soon, he replied. If in the middle of the dialogue you want to put he replied, he questioned, he whispered, example, you don't have to capitalise the second part. So I'll be there soon, he replied, comma, unless you don't need me to. However, here after the speech, you would put a comma, and then after how the person has spoken, you'd put another comma, because this is all part of the same sentence. If you use a question mark or an exclamation mark within dialogue, only capitalise, and that should say word, but I've put work, only capitalise the next word if the sentence is truly over. Would you like to answer the door? She asked. So obviously she asked is part of this sentence. Secondly, all punctuation must go inside the speech mark, so whether you finish it with a question mark, an exclamation mark, or a full stop, all that punctuation goes inside the speech. So here's the example using an exclamation mark. Here is an example with a comma in the middle, so it's all in there, and then also note he replied, which you can see. Thirdly, which is the most important one, so as the reader you don't get lost in who's speaking, you start a new line for a new speaker. So over here I shouted, over here. So you can see that here you've got the exclamation mark. You don't use a capital letter because it's part of the same speech, and then after I shouted, they've put a comma in there because the speech is about to begin. I can see you, Tim roared back at me. Obviously this one has a capital letter because the name is following the speech. And then we never write two voices speaking on the same line here because you get completely lost in who's saying what. So I'll go through these ones with you so you can tick yours off. So add capital letters to the following sentences. So you haven't been listening to me, should have a capital at the beginning. She should have a capital at the beginning. Spoke quietly, don't, because it's the start of speech. I should have a capital, which could go back, he muttered, there should also be a full stop at the end. Like you said, it needs a capital because it's the start of the speech. And then also I did one wrong here and put a capital there, which it doesn't need, so I've crossed it out. And you don't understand, it needs a capital at the start. Then below, a little bit more difficult, I want you to add all of the punctuation needed. So obviously all of the speech starts with the opening of the speech marks. How many times am I going to have to tell you? It's a question and then speech marks go at the end. I suppose it's time to trust each other with a comma and then closed speech marks, comma, reopen them, don't you think? Doesn't need a capital because it's the second part of the speech. She screamed back at him, comma, open speech marks, I won't go, exclamation mark, and close speech mark, Raising her hand, she asked the question, comma, open speech marks, when are we going to lunch, question mark, close your speech marks. Then open your speech marks, I'll be back later, comma, close speech marks, he said as he walked out the door, full stop. Then here's just an example for you with all of those rules put into practice so you can see them. How did you get on in the exam? The teacher asked the girl coming out of the room. Not so well, she replied. I just didn't feel comfortable at any point. The teacher tried to reassure her. You may feel that way now, but I'm sure you did better than you think. I hope you're right. Go home and get some rest. You can't change anything about that exam now. I will, she replied. Thanks. So I've done one here. I've used my cats as an example because they were in the room. So, what do you want to do today? Travis asked Bronte. Eat flies and knock stuff over, Bronte replied. That's what we do every day. That's because we're cats, duh. Well, I'm doing something different. I'm going to go in next door's house and I'm going to sleep. Oh, I have missed a full stop there. I'm coming too, I'll knock their stuff over. So this is something that the cats did. They managed to get into the house next door. Travis went to sleep on their settee. They're allergic to cats, and Bronte just knocked things over. So they were not happy with us. And then the next bit, this is the context on this bit, tells you what the reading task is from. So the next lines are taken from The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. Hopefully some of you have read it. In this extract, a young girl, Lucy, has just entered the magical world of Narnia for the first time and encounters a faun, a kind of half-horse, half-man creature. Good evening, said Lucy, but the faun was so busy picking up its parcels that at first it did not reply. When it had finished, it made her a little bow. Good evening, said the faun. Excuse me, I don't want to be inquisitive, but should I be right in thinking that you are a daughter of Eve? My name's Lucy, she said, not quite understanding him. But you are, forgive me, you are what they call a girl, said the faun. Of course I'm a girl, said Lucy. You are in fact human? Of course I'm human, said Lucy, still a little puzzled. To be sure, said the faun. How stupid of me, but I've never seen a son of Adam or a daughter of Eve before. I'm delighted. That is to say... And then it stopped, as if it had been going to say something it had not intended, but had remembered in time. Delighted, it went on. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Tumnus. I am very pleased to meet you, Mr. Tumnus, said Lucy. So you've got these comprehension questions, which I'll whiz through for you. What was the faun busy doing at the start of the extract? So it says it was busy picking up its parcels. List 3 terms that the faun uses to describe Lucy. So he describes her firstly as a daughter of Eve, then he describes her as a girl, and then he describes her as a human. List 2 emotions Lucy's feeling and explain why she's feeling this way. So at this point, when Lucy's gone through the wardrobe and she ends up in Narnia, she's not aware that she in fact is the unusual one and not the faun, because she's coming at it from the perspective of what her world has been like. So she is... At the beginning here, she doesn't understand him, she's puzzled, and also she's happy to meet him. So you could have put any of those, explain why she's feeling that way. So I've put, she was puzzled by the faun's response, she doesn't understand why he'd have to question if she was human or a girl, and possibly his language, and then also she's happy to have met the faun. The next one, it's line 5, so it's this one. But you are, forgive me. So it says, explain why the writer has used hyphens in the faun's speech in this line. So I've put that possibly he's hesitant and pauses. He could be concerned that he'll offend her because he says, forgive me. And also he's shocked by her. So any of those. Then the next one is an 8-mark question, which you know that we have done previously in these tasks. So you can see that I have gone through and annotated it. The question it asks is, how does the writer create a sense of confusion between the two characters? So I've started off by saying, I've underlined the bit where it says, I don't want to be inquisitive. So here I've put that he's unsure what she is and she's unusual. Then I said, underline where it says, not quite understanding him. I've put she doesn't understand his use of language or why he's confused. Then, to show that the faun's confused, he's asking for clarity or confirmation. He questions what he's seeing and what he thinks is correct and says, you are what they call a girl. Then you've got the repetition of Lucy going, of course, as if it's the most obvious thing that he's said to her, because she's not aware of the context that she's in. Then you've got the admission here that he says, but I've never seen a son of Adam or of Eve. So he's shocked, he could be happy, but he's also surprised. And then also this section where he said he was going to say something, but then he doesn't. Here you could say possibly he doesn't want to overwhelm her. He's asked quite a lot of questions. And again, the idea that he might not want to offend her. So make sure when you're going through these that you literally track them line by line like I've done. You can see as well that some sections, so the first couple of lines I've completely skipped. Here I've skipped the last 3. You're not going to find something in every single line, but if you go through line by line and track it methodically in that way, hopefully you're not going to miss anything really important. I'd say for an 8-mark question, I'd be looking for about 5 to 6 quotes. So as you can see, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. This one that I haven't underlined. So I'm going to show you how to get them into a coherent answer. So firstly, the writer causes, creates, because what we're trying to do is every time we answer a question, we want to reword the question to start us off, and that'll give us a solid footing to show the examiner that we are answering specifically the question. So firstly, the writer creates a sense of confusion. So you've just reworded this. When the fawn appears to need clarification and apologises for asking for it. I don't mean to be inquisitive. He appears hesitant and perhaps fearful to offend. Lucy answers his questions, but is not quite understanding him. So here you've got 1 and 2 quotes. She appears to find his use of language or questions surprising. The fawn questions if she is what they call a girl. You've got 3 and then 4 because Lucy replies, of course, not understanding why he would need to confirm that. Lucy is unaware that she is in the unusual presence in this scenario, and is puzzled by his questions. So you've got 5 up to that point. The confusion subsides. So here, this is important because, like I've talked about before, you're tracking the development of it, which is a harder skill. So you're saying the confusion gets more or less. And just that specific bit saying, even if you would have put the confusion becomes less when, it isn't specifically that I've used the word subside, it's the fact that I've tracked the confusion throughout. And possible frustration when the fawn admits, I've never seen anyone like Lucy before. So using the word admits rather than says. So when you're picking out your evidence, what we're going to be focusing on when you come back into school is looking at the specifics of what particular quotes do. So when you've picked something out, does it highlight something? Does it reinforce something? Does it emphasise something? We're going to be looking at what specifically language does. The only thing that's missing from my answer that I would have liked would be that I would have liked to zoom in on one word, and it could have been puzzled, or it could have been the question. But that is how you can have a go at approaching your question. As always, if you've got any questions or if you're not sure of any of the answers, you can email your member of staff, or you can email myself, or leave comments on Show My Homework. But I hope you're all well, and I look forward to meeting you all in person soon.